my generation, our problem was hubris. I'm a genius. My idea is amazing. Elon needs to hear about this. Like, call Jeff Bezos, get him on the phone. He needs to know about my new subscription shoe company. It's like, who cares, man? But we all had way more hubris than we should. I'd say the problem facing today's generation, as you mentioned, there's a great book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. A lot of it is imposter syndrome and anxiety, right? I think that just know that the hidden truth of the world is that this is all things that were made by people and can be remade just as easily. And there are the 0.01% of exceptional freak show geniuses. Like, I'm sure 5 of my brains fit in George Church's brain or Elon's brain or Peter Thiel's or whatever, right? But the vast majority of people who have built all the things that you touch and use are a couple of IQ points away from you. It's not like they're or the same. And plenty of people who are not, brainiacs have been the ones that have executed and operated and made these things truly happen all around the world.
Welcome to the Going Big podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gentry, and this is the place where we celebrate bold moves and big ideas. Each week, I sit down with inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, and change makers who are making a significant impact in their careers and in their communities. Whether you're looking to level up your leadership, pursue your passion, or just get inspired to take your next big leap, this is where those stories come to life. Now, if you're listening on iTunes, YouTube, or anywhere else you tune into podcasts, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Now, let's dive in to what it means to truly go big. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I am really pleased to have Jeff Rosenthal as my guest today on the Going Big podcast because he really exemplifies going big. And you'll see that very quickly in this conversation. Jeff Rosenthal, together with 3 others in 2008, with no event experience, took on building a global events company that has become renowned for its breadth and magnitude. It's called Summit. You may be familiar with it. It is a community where people exchange, big thinkers, creators come together, exchange ideas and insights about the world and the future. It's amazing. So that in and of itself is significant. Then he and his buddies wrote this phenomenal book, Make No Small Plans, which in and of itself has become really a guidebook for people who are looking for visionary approaches to tackling new innovations. It's been a big inspiration for me personally, has been for the Going Big podcast and for my company, 10X Strategies. That's why I've wanted to have Jeff on this episode for a while. And then after having done this, Jeff, with his friends, bought and built Powder Mountain, which is the biggest ski community in the United States, but it's more than just a mountain. It also is a community of people coming together to learn and discuss and think about problems in a different way, really building community. That's something we want to talk about. And now recently, he just started an investment firm, CIV. It's his newest venture, which is focused on investing at the intersection of technology and critical industries. We've got a lot to talk about. Jeff, I'm really pleased to have you here. But first, out of the blocks, what made you all decide to call this book Make No Small Plans? And what does that title mean to you personally?
Yeah. Wonderful. Kevin, thank you for having me on the podcast. Great to see you. Make No Small Plans is actually a misquote of the wonderful Daniel Burnham quote, Make No Little Plans. And what's great about misquoting people is then you are the original. And so Make No Small Plans, the first time we used that line was the first time we chartered an ocean liner back in 2011 for one of the events we hosted called Summit at Sea. We always would be like, okay, what's a big enough idea to actually excite people who are much more senior, experienced, successful, and interesting than us? And we'd say like, let's rent out the JW Marriott. No, that's not worth it. Like, everybody's busy until they're dead, particularly at a certain level. And we would go through this process of like, what's crazy enough, but actually achievable. And so we were like, could you charter an ocean liner? I think we were 25 years old, maybe 26. And when everyone showed up in Miami for that event, and you were on the highway going out to the to where all the boats were, we had unfurled this giant, I think it was 100 by 100 foot flag basically that said "Make no small plans" on the side of the boat. And for us, yeah, I just always felt like, you live one time. You want to get the best people around you. You have to be focused on things where your reach exceeds your grasp. Like otherwise, it's just not going to create the excitement and the enthusiasm that's required to recruit, a community around you to do things that haven't been done before.
Well, thanks for the reference to Daniel Burnham. That quote has always been an inspiration to me. As folks know, he was the tremendous architect of the 19th century, really, with rebuilding the city of Chicago. But that quote, "Make no little plans; they have no ability to stir men's souls, and otherwise will fail," or something along those lines. It's there on a plaque if you walk into Union Station in Washington, D.C. So it's great that you captured the essence of that. And there's so much, again, to talk about this. Jeff, you and I met a couple of years ago, different conferences. I remember conversations with you, and I didn't even know really what you were doing until after one of those conversations, I stumbled upon the book. And it was the title that caught my attention. And I started looking through it and saw that you were one of the co-authors, which obviously caught my attention all the more. So, I gotta say that the idea of stepping out boldly beyond your wildest dreams has a tremendous ability to capture people's imagination, but it's risky, and most people are unwilling to take those risks. And you all went big so early on. If you could walk us through a little bit about how this came together. My understanding is, you were a college student in Washington, D.C. You were known for being able to put together some parties on campus, but you were a key contributor in this group, the four of you all, to go big. Just tell us a little bit about the early days.
Yeah, absolutely. So in college, I played soccer at American University. I threw parties. I worked in Congress. I worked for the Rules Committee. I was professional staff and floor staff for the Rules Committee in the House of Representatives. I had little clothing companies and startups, and I was just an entrepreneur before I really even knew what the word meant, honestly. My partner in my party business was a guy named Brett Leaf, who went to GW, and he and I, along with our other co-founders, started Summit together. After school, I'd moved to New York, had a couple of jobs, started a business, and that business started to scale. And when you're 22, 23, and things start going well, everything falls apart because you have no experience, you don't know what you're doing. And I was like, man, we were all like, we really need to build a peer group. And so, we cold called and Facebook messaged different entrepreneurs that we had read about. We got 19 people to go skiing with us in Park City, Utah in 2008. Sam Altman was on that first trip, the founders of College Humor, founders of Thrillist, a couple of other really amazing people. 6 months later, we threw our second event in Mexico, and it had the founders of Facebook and YouTube and Uber before Uber, but also Change.org and Donors Choose and Charity Water. And so those first two events, we literally put on our credit cards. And our third event was at the White House a month after the Obama administration took office. So we went from this little tiny nugget of an idea to, hosting events on behalf of the administration in like 300 days. And so it was a very exponential curve. And funny enough, at that event, Tony Hsieh, who actually has since passed away, but he was the founder of Zappos. He wrote a great book called Delivering Happiness. He pulled us aside after that event and he said, hey guys, are there people here who, if they didn't have their personal and professional success, you wouldn't have them to your parents' house for dinner? And we were like, yeah, of course. There's some people here that like, we don't want to have to our parents' house for dinner. But that's not what we were tasked with. We were told to bring the, best and brightest founders in America. And he's like, yeah, well, they can't come anymore. Because when you're building a community, culture is the most important thing. And if people don't fit that culture, you're ultimately not going to go anywhere. And until that moment, we didn't realize we were building a community. And that night, we literally didn't sleep and just kept thinking about that. And we came up with our criteria. One, are these people innovators in their field, regardless of the discipline? And two, are they just kind, open-minded people that, regardless of their professional success, we would be, thrilled to introduce them to our folks? And then, our conferences got more and more sophisticated, and, we hosted incredible people. We started chartering ocean liners. We started bringing in music and art and food. And now that's pretty, standard. I think at the time it hadn't really been done before, leading to in 2013 at 28 years old, buying the largest ski resort in the United States, very much inspired by this idea of, having foundation, having roots, having a physical home, for this idea or this community that otherwise would be ephemeral.
Well, okay. So I think this begs a number of questions, because people who are listening, it's like, hey, wait, that is a lot of stuff that happened very quickly. And so how do you go from your early 20s just having this kind of concept, but you truly want to go big? Because you'll even if you just had 19 people at the first meeting, you had some real players, and maybe they weren't as big of players then as they are now, but they certainly were on a track. I mean, how did just some of this happen initially conceptually? Did you say, hey, look, we want to go big? And I do want to come back to the question about building a community through having the right culture. But before we get there, did you initially say, let's go big? How do you even begin to establish that vision?
Well, I don't think we didn't have a strategy. This was, we would say, gardening, not architecture. It wasn't as though we had a strategic plan that we executed on against that ultimately led to us buying Powder Mountain. This was very much like we would reevaluate what we should do next after every event that we would host. It was a revolution, not an evolution. It changed the trajectory almost completely based on the people who we got to come to these experiences and the quality of experience that they had. And that would lead to their willingness to build and partner with us on a go-forward basis. So no, we weren't like, hey, let's go big and that, but I do think it was part of our culture from the very beginning. Like we had ambition, certainly, but we were having so much fun. There's this great enthusiasm. The root of enthusiasm in theos in Latin means with God. And if it's fun for me and it's work for you, I'm going to run circles around you, and vice versa. So, I think that foundationally, what enabled us going big was partnership. We would sit around the phone, cold calling people, more or less, or getting on the phone with these folks who didn't really want to spend time with us, and ultimately would leave them convinced that they should actually spend money to come to our gatherings. And that really came from sitting with my co-founders and us hearing each other articulate, our vision for what this thing would become. We also all lived together. And then we did that for almost 5 years, not just the founders, but the first 20 employees. So it was 4, and then it was 6, and then it was 10, and then it was 20. We would move the whole company to a new city or place every 4 to 6 weeks. And then once at scale, 4 to 6 months, leading until we ultimately moved to Utah and bought Powder Mountain. But that meant that at lunch we were ideating, at the gym we were talking about things that we might be able to do. It was just this constant creative process. And so I think that was the conditions that led to us having the ability to shoot for the stars. And when you do that, you ultimately land on the moon. You might not achieve all the crazy things that you're attempting, but you're certainly going to get somewhere special.
All right. Well, 2 questions related to that. Talk a little bit more about partnership. There were 4 of you. Partnership is often defined in this way about shared values and shared objectives. But what was necessary in terms of synergy or common principles or foundation in order for you all to work together so productively?
I think first and foremost is character and integrity. Friendship is fragile. And in my opinion, along with family, the most special thing that you're going to experience in life, right? There's 9 billion people on the planet. There's, if you're lucky, a few that deeply care about you. And, I think that foundationally, if you do not share character and integrity and values with the people you're building with, you are doomed. Every single time I've ever worked with anybody in my career where I've been like, well, I don't know that I align on these things, but think about all the value they'll create for us. It never works out. That's the first and most important thing. There's no greater building block than trust. This is, built in drops and lost in buckets. And so, I was very lucky to get to partner with guys that, I was very aligned with. In terms of vision, it's interesting. Like I think now I'm 40, I've been in business for 20 years. We'll run a process with stakeholders where we'll say, okay, what is your vision? Not the company vision, your vision for what we're going to do. And then we'll go to the next person and say, all right, great, what's your vision? And then how do we align those different perspectives and overlay them so we ultimately are all very clear on where we're going as a team? I think that we had the luxury of doing that just in dialogue. And because we were so young, we were 23 when we started this, we were just sharpening each other like swords. Like I needed my partners to evolve to a greater place today than they were at yesterday. Like if you were only as good as you were yesterday, that's not good enough. And so all of us held each other to a really high standard. I grew up playing team sports and, was a competitive athlete growing up. And I think that gave me this, addiction to championship ball clubs. Like I don't know of a better feeling than like that feeling of coming together with a group of people and achieving something that was once beyond your reach. And so there was always a culture of exceptionalism, and an expectation of performance. And so while we were all friends, and we all worked together, people say don't work with your friends. I've only worked with my friends, but there is, a responsibility that you take in those situations to deliver and to step up and to be there. Certainly there'll be times where, you're not at your best or that you need a break. And that's where it's, imperative that you have partners that can carry that weight on your behalf and vice versa when they can't, perform. But yeah, those were, I think, many of the things that really enabled us early on.
Wow. What was that line again? Reputation is gained in drops and lost in buckets?
Yeah. You build it in drops and you lose it in buckets.
Oh, well said. All right. Well, related to that, several episodes ago of the Going Big podcast, I had Will Guidara, who had the vision for building 11 Madison Park into the greatest restaurant in the world, this concept of unreasonable hospitality. And he often goes back to a quote from his father that said, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do? How bound were you all by any concept of risk or failure, or were you at a state? I mean, yes, you put everything on your credit card. I mean, but tell us a little bit more about the sort of risk-taking attitude.
Our reaction to imposter syndrome was to mess with people. And so instead of being like, oh man, I don't know if I can be in this room. Everybody's so successful. They're so talented. Like, how do I deserve to be here? They're going to know that I'm, a novice, and that sort of thought pattern, which can be really crippling, right? It makes it very, very difficult. Our motion when we would feel that was to just literally mess with those people. And so we would just talk shit and they would have fun. And so it wasn't about, like, the professional relationship first in those interactions. It was like, at a minimum, this is going to be their favorite interaction of the week, right? Like if we can achieve that, then there's likely a door that's open for us, on an ongoing basis. And so, I think that was extremely empowering.
Wow.
In terms of like, if you knew you couldn't fail, like we didn't think about failure at all. We didn't have anything. Why would we care? Like we had no reputation. We had no money. We had thrown a couple of cool events. Who cares? Like let's try. And in the worst case, it's not like the people that love us would love us any more or less based on the success or failure of our venture. And I think that, that enabled us to really go for it. Like, none of us come from like mega wealthy families or anything, but we certainly did grow up, solidly middle class and have loving parents. And, that puts us damn near the end zone in the scale of life, right? And so I think we really did feel like we had the capacity to do something great, which is totally unmoored from reality. Like none of us were Target students, none of us went to Ivy League schools, none of us were recruited to Goldman Sachs. Like we were pretty non-target guys. And yet, we unreasonably thought that, we too could build something special. I think that there's a way to perceive failure that's more productive, which is just, it's all a learning opportunity. It's all, on the path to getting where you want to go. If you are doing something new, you're definitely wrong. The question is just how far are you from the right answer, right? So accepting that is key. There's a great, book that the kind of like the the graphic novel version of the samurai philosophy. It's called the Hagakure. It's this amazing. I love this book, but one of the things that they talk about is being a samurai. It means that you're always in shame. You're always in shame because you're always trying to improve beyond the point that you're at today, and therefore you are in a constant state of failure. Yeah, so I think that from very early age was our perspective, and allowed us to go for it.
All right. Well, just to give us some perspective, in those early days of Summit, was there a particularly scary moment when you were like, oh my gosh, what have we gotten ourselves into? Or is this going to work or what?
It started working almost immediately. So there was never like, is this going to work? Like it was the right idea for the right time. Like, these worlds were all wildly disconnected. Nobody's businesses were really relevant to each other's, right? And so today that's completely shifted and everything really is connected. But you rewind the clock 20 years, it was a very different business ecosystem. So I think it was the right at the right time. The momentum was always there. We would call it, Kevin, Final Fridays. Have you ever heard the term Final Fridays?
No, please go ahead.
Final Friday is the last day you can wire the money because the bank is closed.
Right.
We had plenty of those where it was like,
we've all been there.
We were like, man, okay, we got a week and a half to figure this out. When we chartered the first ocean liner, we didn't have the cash. They let us do it in payments and we didn't have to show proof of funds. So like we could have lost the sailing after taking in millions of dollars. Like I wouldn't suggest it. Or when we bought Powder Mountain, in the time between locking up the exclusive right to buy it and hosting people and raising the capital and buying the mountain, we built a $3 million lodge on top of the mountain to drive to that final amount that we needed. I think we were like 20 million short. And so we took 3 million of our earnest capital, the money that wasn't in escrow, and built this lodge. Had we not completed the transaction, we just would have, built the owners a nice lodge. So clearly we have a very, very high degree of risk tolerance, or at least used to. And I think that, I don't want to name the partner by name, but I have one co-founder who would be like, dude, if we don't get the money in a week and a half, we're out of business. So you'd be like, a week and a half? It's not even a problem. Call me next Wednesday. I'm going to play tennis. You're like, all right, dude. So, we certainly, touched the sun a couple of times.
Well, I got to tell you, I think I've shared with you that the book came at a critical time for me. I was thinking of starting a new business. I had too much apprehension about it. And it really gave me the encouragement to go. And I think I shared with you a friend of mine from Santiago, Chile. He and I have been working on different efforts in Latin America for a long time. And we had this idea about bringing together in communities some people who were very concerned about human freedom together in one spot. We picked Lima, Peru, and we just said, let's just do it. And let's just do it in a few months. And it was about 3 weeks out where we were like, we really probably ought to pull the plug on this. This is crazy. We are in over our heads. It's not going to work. And I'm telling you, it was just like, let's just go. What's the worst that can happen? And it worked. And there's a lot to be said for just going. Well, tell us a little bit more about First Summit and then Powder Mountain. First Summit, in terms of it's not just an event, it's a community. And you talked about how culture is important to that. What's the goal? What are some good things that have come out of it as a result of bringing people together like this?
Yeah, we always refer to it as a mutual aid society. This idea that our liberation is bound up together. I genuinely get more pleasure out of being a part of the stories of people who I either care about or am inspired by, and supporting those people and the things that they want to achieve in the world. I certainly have my own ambitions that are also equally unreasonable, but it's what made us real community builders. I think there were 1,000 others that started around the time we did. Ultimately, the reason Summit really lasted and was durable was because the people at the top of that organization truly were doing it on behalf of a community. It was not a scheme to eventually make money. It wasn't. It was really about what we were saying, what it was about. There was no extractive ulterior motive, and people really felt that. It also leads me to not really wanting to give you the examples of all the things that came out of it. There's 30,000 members around the world, every generational founder, creative, policy leader, you name it. There's amazing things that came from this community. Those are their stories. They're really not my stories. And that's another thing that I was always pretty allergic to. And every journalist would ask the same thing, be like, okay, well, tell us about, the outcomes, like who partnered with who and, what happened here. It's like, you know what, that's really their business. That's not our business. Like we shouldn't claim those successes because frankly, like an introduction, a connection, that's 0.01% of what it takes to build anything. And then it's a decade or more of, a lot of people's life's purpose and work and just the amount of time and effort and energy. And so I'm very apprehensive to really like claim those successes as our own. What I will say is that there's billions and billions of dollars of companies that were formed and impact areas that were underwritten and marriages and children and all of these really amazing and wonderful outcomes that came from Summit. But I think that foundationally that idea of a mutual aid society is not for everybody. There were moments where Summit got cool and people were like, oh, yeah, that's me. That's what I want to go and be a part of. And when they got there, they didn't really feel comfortable in that kind of an environment, right? It's very much self-selecting. And, for those that love it and enjoy it, there's really still nothing else like it.
All right. So Powder Mountain, how did that come about as an idea? I mean, were you just sitting around like, hey, let's just go buy a ski resort? And again, it's just like Summit is not an event.
Yeah.
Powder Mountain is not just a ski resort. What were you trying? What have you tried to achieve there?
Yeah, sure. So I'll tell you the story of Powder. So we have amazing mentors. Just our friends and our mentors put us on game. Like I can't overstate how like non-intellectual, how like, meddling we were as entrepreneurs. We're decent. We're not great. We're not, peers with the best in our generation when it comes to like scaling, operating and executing a world-class business. But, with the friends and the mentors and the people that we had gathered around us, we really had amazing references. And so Summit's rolling and people are like, man, you really got to learn about Black Mountain College. You got to learn about the Bauhaus. It was a physical building, a place in Austria. Incredible culture. You could be Kandinsky, like building the foundations for Impressionism, and you're still going to teach house painting classes, right? And so their idea was, we're all just blue collar people, and we reach moments of exaltation and make great works, and then we come back down and we, make a sandwich and go to bed and take a shower like every other human on the planet. There was, Gertrude Stein in DC and her salons, or Catherine Graham. Gertrude Stein in Paris, Catherine Graham in DC. There's just these wonderful examples of these physical places or these communities that came together that had lasting impact. And so for us, we had this sneaking suspicion that for Summit to be able to stand the test of time, or at least the culture, because it doesn't even need to be Summit in name, but the culture of this community, it would need roots. It would need a physical home. So we looked at Soho House type models. We looked at beachfronts, and we were 27, 28 years old. We had never developed anything or built anything vertically. So, a lot of hubris to even consider it in the first place. But we were always like, when it's the right time in 4 or 5 years or whatever, maybe we'll pursue this. Powder Mountain was a broken private equity deal. There was a group called Pranaya out of Japan that had 18 golf resorts and 1 ski resort, most of which were underwater. And it was quietly for sale. And so one of the, members of our community had a home out there, said, guys, you got to come and see this place. And we were like, you're a moron. There's no way we'll ever do this. And we'll see you on Saturday. Because we ski and we had heard about Powder Mountain. It's the largest ski resort in America. It's this legendary place that, people who ski there say they ski at altitude. You know what I mean? It's like, just, that's the rule. And we get there and we're standing on top of the mountain and we're looking out over the Great Salt Lake and we can see 4 states from the top. And we're like, this is our destiny. Like, we now have to do this. Funny story. So we threw an event called Summit Base Camp in Squaw Valley. We had 750 people there. And on the last day of the event, about 60 or so of them got a note from us saying like, hey, change your flight, meet us behind the hotel tomorrow morning. We're not going to tell you where you're going. And so there was a bus and everybody gets on the bus and they go to the airport in Reno and there's an unmarked gate with no destination on the screen. Like it's Harry Potter going to Hogwarts or something. Everybody gets on the plane. I get to get on the mic and, do the announcement. And we land in Salt Lake, take everybody out to Powder Mountain and do our first event and kind of tell this first group our vision for like buying this mountain and building this community. It took us about a year and a half to crowdfund the money from, people who we had built a reputation of over-promising and then over-delivering. We were lucky to get some fantastic investors who the sentiment was basically like, guys, today you are not able to succeed at this, but we believe in your capacity to actually learn and grow into this to where we think that you will be able to succeed in it. And so again, very, very lucky that we had these founding members that took this risk on us. And then, we built about 5.5 miles of roads and infrastructure, 5 neighborhoods, deployed about $250 million of capital. We had an incredible time. We were hosting every weekend over that, 2-year run, hundreds of people, music and food and activities. And as soon as those people left, all of the master planners and architects and land planners would come in, and we would run these charrettes throughout the week to figure out how to actually do this, right? So it was insane, but we were young and we had the energy. So ultimately, we grew that over quite some time. It was considerably harder than we thought. Again, like just, reckless naivete, honestly. And I think we got pretty lucky. We did build a plane while we flew it, and we ultimately sold controlling interest about 2 years ago to Reed Hastings, the chairman of Netflix, who was a long-term neighbor at the mountain, who's now the CEO. And goes to the office every day and runs the resort and has very generously contributed 9 figures of capital additionally to continue the development and the art programs and all that kind of stuff. So I'm still a co-owner, albeit a small one. It's now the Reed Show, which I couldn't be more thrilled by. And we're still neighbors. We still host events up there all the time. And I think the vision now, Reed took what we had done, and then he ended up, first of all, expanding the resort even further. It was already the largest resort in America. The announcements that you're going to see in the next couple of months are pretty astounding. And he took half the mountain and made it private and half is public. And so there's a bunch of other fun things that we did out there. There's tons of stories or whatever. But, his philosophy is, one, he wants to make a more approachable and achievable private resort, with Powder. And there's 10,000 private golf courses. There's like 1 private ski resort in America right now. And so this is the way that there's really a financial model to do this. Like, frankly, it was always a struggle. I mean, again, like we were so naive. We raised the first, 40 some odd million dollars to buy the asset. And we're like, oh, roads, infrastructure. That's right. We need more money and, municipal bonds and EB5 financing. And, it was a real crash course. But what I'll say is calm seas make for shitty captains. And I couldn't be more grateful for the whole road.
Well, Jeff, what is the difference between a bold plan and a reckless plan?
These days, I advise against the build the plane while you fly it metaphor. Like, that's a very dumb way to build anything. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to crash the plane. Don't do that. These days I measure 10 times before I cut once. I'm 40. I have 20 years of experience in business. I have all of the relationships and network and platform that I didn't have when we started Summit. So the idea that you would just use, endless, boundless energy to, pave over your mistakes, can't do that at 40. It's just not going to work. And once you start playing, at a higher, say, risk reward level, you don't get the same sort of leeway. Like today, if we raised our first fund with our investment firm, CIV, it's a $210 million fund. If I deploy it recklessly, first of all, I'm, absolutely betraying the trust that my investors have put in me. But also, if I blow it, there is no fun too. Like, I need to go into a new business. So yeah, my advice would be, foundationally, if you have a big idea, you have a bold vision, stabilize that idea. Really talk to as many people as you can who will beat up your idea and tell you all the ways in which you're wrong. Sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. If they're a category expert and you want to do something innovative, they're going to be biased to things not changing and not working, right? They don't, that tends to be the case also in big institutions, as opposed to, your rebel alliance. So, when we started CIV, just to put it in perspective, the first thing we did is met a dozen law firms, which seems counterintuitive, right? It's like, what? What do you mean meet a dozen law firms? It's like, well, they all work with all the other kinds of companies that look and smell and act a lot like we will. They have all the category expertise. They've seen the ways to do it that are right and the ways to do it that are wrong. And frankly, they want to win your business, right? And so you're going to get some really amazing reference calls with those people who are also experts. And we tend to do this, like, and now at this age, I want to take, hundreds of meetings on a topic area, and I want to understand, all of the different ways that something can be done. And then you can really diffuse that and determine what it is you want your version to be. So, I was a bit, I just didn't have mentors growing up in that way. Like, I didn't know anybody that had built like a big scaled entrepreneurial endeavor growing up in Dallas, Texas. It just wasn't my community. So I didn't pursue mentors. I pursued peers. I went this way, not vertical, with someone, right? And so that doesn't really help you, miss the, say, hardest won lessons. We were all kind of learning them together. You certainly had, a greater set of resources, but it wasn't like you had somebody with gray hair who had done it before, shoulder to shoulder with you. And so had I been able to rewind the clock at Powder Mountain, I wish that I had just given, a third of the project to Barry Sternlicht and Starwood and say, hey, buddy, you run it. Here's a third of it for free. Make us all rich and successful and all, do what I'm great at, which is building events and community.
All right. Well, tell us about your new venture, CIV. You referenced it, but what's your vision there?
Yeah, I am in this really incredibly lucky place where my previous ventures were successful. I've built this amazing community of people. I have I have kids. I've had a successful outcome in a business, and so my back's not really against the wall as it once was. And I had this luxury of thinking, okay, I'm 40. These are probably my Jordan years. The next decade or two are going to be the most productive years of my life. What do I want to do? How do I want to spend my time? Fundamentally, I believe that, nothing great happens in under a decade. Like, that is the minimum it takes to build real wisdom and real scale. And that means that you better love the next thing that you are doing, to be intellectually stimulated in a way where you want to show up and drive, for a decade. I think the Japanese kind of have this, right? Like, whatever it is that you do, build a business, drive a bus. This is all the rock in which you sharpen yourself against in life. It's just all a path to self-actualization. And in this case, I happen to have a best friend, my co-founder, Patrick Maloney. Patrick's built and scaled and sold 3 businesses to publics in the energy sector. And he and I had moved to Austin right around the same time. He had sold his previous business, Inspire, to Shell. I had sold Powder Mountain to Reed Hastings. And we were down in Austin during COVID, really kind of in a similar space. And so we went on this. First, we had to determine whether or not we should build together. Just because you're buddies doesn't mean you should. So we actually wrote each other like pen pals after we would have these dialogues and conversations, because, in a conversation, there's things that can be lost. And so things as simple as like, what time do we get to work, right? Like, what level of in-office participation is required of all of our employees? How do we both feel about that? What's the culture that we want to create? We then looked at holding company models, incubator and accelerator models, and we ultimately arrived at this back and build structure that we're now deploying at Civ. So Civ is short for civilization. We both back companies and also will co-found companies on platforms. So we still get to, exercise our entrepreneurial spirit in a way. It's certainly entrepreneurial building an investment firm. Like, it's a startup like any other startup. But we also still have this function where we actually can launch things off the platform. In terms of the why, I think that this is a very, very unique time in history. You have this inflecting energy demand driven by compute and reshoring. You essentially have these multi-decade megatrends all coalescing at the same time. So first and foremost, AI and compute. You have both the immense power needs behind it. You have the whole digital infrastructure vertical. And then you also have how AI will truly transform every single aspect of society and business. We're then reshoring after 30 years of globalization, critical industries of all types, right? And without deep advanced manufacturing and automation coupled with software enablement, it will not happen. We just fundamentally do not have the assets required to reshore these industries in the United States and build them new. Right now we don't refine uranium in the United States. We don't refine lithium. We have one copper mine that's at full capacity on a global scale, right? So ultimately, we don't make transformers in the US right now. There's just 1,000 of these things that we need to do really for long-term prosperity. And it will require a real industrial evolution to take place. And then the third is power. We say that we want to electrify everything. We want a 3x electricity consumption in 10 years. This is a physical impossibility. You can't scale power like the internet. It just doesn't work that way. This is steel, and this is rebar, and this is concrete, and this is like dudes in hard hats and work boots on job sites. Like, just does not scale that way. So it's also now becoming clearer and clearer that it's a national security imperative. And it always was the greatest input to prosperity. So I think we're energy blind in our society. We just don't really realize how foundational power is to all of our prosperity and how it always has been. If you look at healthcare outcomes, education outcomes. And so we invest across all these things: energy, robotics, AI, supply chain, logistics, manufacturing. We're very founder driven. Like, I've just never seen an outlier company that wasn't built by an outlier founder and a remarkable team. I don't believe in hired guns. Like, I'm not going to take over that business and run it if that founder who had that vision isn't present. I just fundamentally don't think it can be a venture scale return, which is a very specific thing. Like, there's plenty of amazing businesses in America that you can build. You can make millions of dollars. You can sell those for tens of millions of dollars. That is not a venture scale return. This game that we are in is about 20x outcomes, right? So we tend to focus on scale tech, not deep tech, meaning that we're not doing things that are with significant science or technology risk. If it's in the lab, it's not for us. I'm not a PhD. I can't help you there. But we do fundamentally believe that the chasm to cross with the vast majority of things is one of execution, not one of pure invention. We then like to test customer demand. So we literally underwrite and subscribe commercial partners through our investment process. Founders love it, right? Because they walk with really high trust, high reference customer relationships. And that's the best way for us to know how the market sees that product. Will you buy it? On what timeline? At what scale? And then it allows us to back into competitive unit economics. And so this sounds a little obvious, but if you've seen how a lot of these things have been invested in the last 5-10 years, there are a lot of things that people have bet on in huge ways that at the end of the rainbow just do not have fundamentally competitive unit economics. They will not scale. And it's been a blast, man. So this is our first fund. I have one other co-founder named Abijoy Mitra. He joined us from Cotu, where he was a general partner. And previously was at a firm called Valor Equity Partners. They were the lead directors at SpaceX and Tesla. And we've been building an incredible team here in Venice, California. We actually bought 901 Abbott Kinney, which is the former Charles and Ray Eames office, where we've been building like a little innovation campus.
Well, you are certainly making no small plans. You pack a lot in there. And you know Tyler Cowan, Jeff, Brendan McCord. I've had them on recently on episodes where they both talk about, with respect to artificial intelligence, we ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, it's just going to be mind-blowing, the pace of new innovation. So good for you. Well, I want to bring this to a close with some additional advice that you might give to those listening. The first is, what would you share with people who just deal with the psychological barriers of, I just can't, even if I dream this big, I just can't do it? How do you, it's just easier to listen to those who say, don't do it, it won't work, often than it is to that little voice of encouragement, just go for it. What would you share? What words of encouragement would you offer?
Well, first and foremost, if you think you can't, you're right. Just first principle, start there. If you think you can't, you're definitely right. So changing that mindset, of course, is essential. And when I talk to kids these days, like my generation, our problem was hubris. I'm a genius. My idea is amazing. Elon needs to hear about this. Like, call Jeff Bezos, get him on the phone. He needs to know about my new subscription shoe company. It's like, who cares, man? But we all had way more hubris than we should. I'd say the problem facing today's generation, as you mentioned, there's a great book called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. A lot of it is imposter syndrome and anxiety, right? I think that just know that the hidden truth of the world is that this is all things that were made by people and can be remade just as easily. There are the 0.01% of exceptional freak show geniuses. Like, I'm sure 5 of my brains fit in George Church's brain or Elon's brain or Peter Thiel's, whatever, right? But the vast majority of people who have built all the things that you touch and use are a couple of IQ points away from you. It's not like they're or the same. And plenty of people who are not, brainiacs have been the ones that have executed and operated and made these things truly happen all around the world. And so, and I think that when you interact with people like that and meet them and humanize them, it really helps you see yourself in that state. Friend or fan is an important, early foundational piece of advice I got. It's like, you're either going to be a friend to these people or you're going to be a fan of these people. I don't need any fans. I do need friends. I like talking to people who are passionately interested about the things I'm passionately interested in. And if you ask me a good question, I get to reinforce my own knowledge, learning, expertise, and enjoyment, right? Like, I enjoy these conversations. So I'd say, truly finding something that you are enthusiastic about so you can build your own expertise and you are worthy in a conversation with someone you admire where you're also adding value. Entrepreneurship's not for everybody. It's okay. Like, I refer to it as an affliction. I'm afflicted by creation. Now I can say I'm enthused, or I can use much more flowery language. But the reality is I'm going to die with my boots on. It's okay. Like, I know this. It makes me a better husband. It makes me a better friend. It makes me a better father. For me, it's the fountain of youth. I get energized by this. Plenty of people get drained by this. And the risk, man, if you don't deal well with anxiety, do not do this. Like, it's just not for you. You can work with or for an amazing entrepreneurial company. Like, I encourage that. Like, if you care deeply about a space and you don't feel like you are capable of doing what I'm talking about, go and join an organization that you think has a shot at doing it. I really get annoyed about, one of my big gripes with, and I'm on the board of Ocean Conservancy. I'm on the Leadership Council at Conservation International. I do care about, irrecoverable climates. Like, I love the earth. I enjoy nature. But a big problem with this movement is just this whole kind of like, oh, our parents' generation left us with this legacy and now we're screwed. It's like, dude, then get in the game. Like, join an organization that can solve the problem. Imagine if we talked that way about cancer. Oh, cancer, our parents' generation didn't cure cancer, and now we're stuck with the bag. It's like, no, dude, that's not how that space works. Like, people are inventing the future every day in life sciences in ways that will extend our lives and those of our loved ones, right? And so I implore, people not to put the pressure on themselves to do it if it's not for them. Like, if you tend to have a trend line, like you heard me. I was like 19, and I had like 5 projects. I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was. It's just like, that's in my nature. It would make me a really shitty employee. Like, I'm telling you, I promise you, I am a bad employee. Like, I was not good at any job I had. I won't be good at any job in the future. But as like an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a founder, it is a skill set. So all it is to say is that, lean into what makes you exceptional. All of us have something. Every one of us has a gift. Discovering what yours is and then where to apply it and with whom is essential. I'm also not a CEO. I should specify that. Like, I know this about myself. I would be a meddling, decent to poor CEO. I'm a fantastic co-founder. I'm a really good team member. If you throw me the ball or if you hand me the ball or if you put me around, the line, I need to sack the quarterback all day long. I'm not the quarterback. That's okay. And there's no ego around that. And so I guess the only other thing I would say, and this is, run-on sentence, but I'm just trying to share some value here. I'm extremely sensitive to extrinsic motivation. I tend to only want to spend time with and work with people who are intrinsically motivated. And so if you're thinking about like the thing that you will buy or how people will view you or any of those things, you're just not going to get there. Like, sure, there's, malignant narcissists who get to, the greatest positions in society, it seems, in this day and age. But if that's not you, which I hope it isn't, and if you're listening to this podcast, you almost certainly are not. You really do need to focus on the intrinsic, what truly motivates you, what's going to bring you personal pleasure every single day, and assume it's a 20-year run. Like, if you don't think you're going to do it for 20 years, don't start. And if you do, if you believe it, then who cares what happens on a day-to-day basis? Like, you're going to, the search is in progress. You're going to find it.
Awesome. Jeff, I've always enjoyed conversations with you over the years. You have this intellectual curiosity, you have this enthusiasm. It's infectious. Good for you. All right. So here's a last two wrap up questions. I always ask this. You're still a young man, but thinking about a younger version of yourself, maybe that 19-year-old, 20-year-old, what now, knowing what you now know, what advice would you give to that younger version of yourself that you might have done any differently?
Well, yeah, I think economically, I wish I bet more on all my friends. Like the people that inspired me the most generationally ultimately went on and built some pretty incredible things. And if I could rewind the clock, like I've been investing for a very long time, and I, definitely had some of those opportunities early. In some cases I did, and I wish I doubled and tripled and quadrupled down. But bet on your friends. And I wouldn't really change a thing, man. I mean, I don't know what kind of advice me today. I mean, you got to remember, like at 19, I was still like a jock. I was still, a hustler. I was still, motivated by all the things that like a college kid are motivated by. And to say like, hey, dude, you need to prioritize these things versus those, like I wouldn't have been able to hear it. I'd have been great. I need to learn that through experience. So at 19, I mean, man, just do your best, forget the rest, never surrender forever. I don't know.
Well, you may have summed it up, and you've given a lot of great advice, but just the parting words for anybody listening who knows the value of casting a big, bold vision, and they're hearing from example, and they're energized and they're inspired. What do you tell them now? Think of yourself now as coach rather than a member of the team. What advice would you share?
Yeah. Well, my job now as a venture capitalist is to do this, right? I'm evaluating markets, businesses, and people. I'm determining whether or not I believe that there is a real scale to this business or this platform. Like, can this truly be world changing, right? Then I'm looking at the approach. Like, do you have an approach that is durable? Like, can you build and scale a business in this space that is, capturing value and creating value? And then I'd say the most important piece is the people. And is this somebody that I believe is a true outlier founder, a 0.1% founder? That means 1 in 1,000. And a lot of that has to do with leadership. Are they coachable? Is a huge piece that we think about. We back people who've built and scaled and won things before. We also back kids that are like straight out of school and they're geniuses with no experience. And the question is, okay, are they coachable? Like, can we work with them? Are they, and not just us, but anybody, like, do they think they already have the answer to everything? Or are they going to be like voraciously pulling in wisdom omnidirectionally for the rest of their lives? People who are, idea generators, it tends to never stop, right? Like if it's somebody who's like, this person could be really good, but they don't really have an idea yet. It's like that tends to not really work. Like, they have ideas all the time. The question is like, which one to pick, right? And how to refine it and how to make it better, how to stabilize the idea. And then I think the piece that is often overlooked is leadership. Like, can you recruit and lead and inspire a world-class team? It's incredible. When you see somebody who's like 23 or 26, and it's like, whoa, how did you get like all these rock stars to like leave what they were doing or choose this path to go to work with you versus something more established? Like, that's a real signal. And so I would reflect on, like, do I have those things? Like, am I building into a space that is truly, worthy of my time and other people's time? Or is it also rare? Like, I have plenty of friends that are like, deal brokers and they're going to make a lot more money than me. I have no interest. Like, I just don't have any interest in just making money off of like, putting cash and investment together. It's just not that inspiring or interesting. Like, is my approach informed by all of the ways that this was done before? Like the great virtuoso pianists, they didn't just like start, playing jazz. They first learned everything foundationally to truly be masters. And then they started to innovate on top of that platform of what came before them, right? And so I think that a lot of times people take shortcuts and that never works out. Like every time you take a shortcut, you pay for it in the long term. The other example I give is like, what sport do you love, Kevin? What's your favorite sport?
Oh gosh, I'd say baseball.
Okay. Congratulations, Kevin. You're starting as pitcher, Game 6, World Series. Need you to be in the stadium at 7 p.m. It will be the worst day of your life, right? Like,
Yes.
you are not prepared for that.
Yes.
And so don't take shortcuts. And then the last is like really reflect on, am I a leader? Like, do I have those qualities where I feel like I could recruit and grow a true team and a culture and a community around this idea? And if I'm not, I either go and work with somebody who has those qualities, or I recruit that person as the co-founder to build this with me.
Lots of great advice. Lots of great insights. Those of you who are listening today, check out Summit, check out Powder Mountain, check out CIV, check out Jeff Rosenthal, and definitely get your hands on Make No Small Plans. If these ideas at all intrigue you, you're going to be motivated further by reading it. You're going to get all kinds of ideas. I took notes, and it was incredibly formative for me. Jeff, I'm grateful to you and your co-founders for giving me the ideas and inspirations to launch my business and even to launch the Going Big podcast, which I attribute its name to you and the book. So thank you very much. And by the way, for the past several weeks, it's been #1 on iTunes in the nonprofit category because I wanted to think big from the outset. So thank you very, very much.
Kevin, you're the man. I mean, that's reflective of your efforts. It's very flattering and kind of you to say, but it's not true. You're the man. That's why.
Wow, Jeff, it's great to be with you again. Look forward to many more occasions. And ladies and gentlemen, keep your eyes on Jeff Rosenthal for many years to come.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for tuning in to the Going Big podcast. I hope today's conversation left you feeling energized and ready to tackle your biggest goals. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps spread the word, and it gets these inspiring stories out to more people. You can also find more content, resources, and updates at our website, goingbigpodcast.com. Remember, the only limits are the ones you don't challenge, the limits that you impose on yourself. Keep pushing, keep growing, and above all, keep going big. See you next time on the Going Big podcast.